Okay, so yesterday we talked about polygons and what the difference between a regular polygon and an irregular polygon is, and also the different names of the polygons, right? How do we determine what a polygon is called? Marcus?
Based on the number of its sides.
Is it only based on the number of its sides?
Also, it could be angles and...
Yeah, so we call a polygon by its name based on the number of sides it has, or angles it has, and vertices, corners that it has, okay? Today we're going to talk about a specific type of polygon, and today we're talking about triangles, okay? This is chapter 11.2, called triangles. Your learning goal today is to be able to classify and draw triangles using their properties. Remember that classify means to sort based on its traits or its properties. You should have your learning goal written down already. Let's take a look at the problem of the day. Julio keeps his class photo in this picture frame. Okay, it's kind of a unique shape of a picture frame. How would you describe the sides and angles of the picture frame? Is it a regular polygon? How do you know? What do you guys think? Harushi, what do you think?
I would describe the sides and angles in the triangle to be all the same thing, or congruent. So it was a regular polygon. I know because all of the sides, angles, and vertices are congruent.
Yeah. So Harushi says that this is a regular polygon because all of the sides and angles are congruent. I have a question though. How do you know? How do you know? Just by looking at the picture, can you know that it's congruent?
Not exactly.
Not
It
exactly.
might be like 1/10 of a centimeter off, but you can't see that.
Yeah, that's why it's the limit.
We might assume, do all the sides look the same length?
Yeah.
Do all the angles look the same? But unless you went up there and used a ruler and a protractor to measure, can you be 100% sure? What symbols could we add to make it without a doubt that this is a regular polygon? Rashika? We would need to draw some symbols to show that all the angles are congruent and all of the sides are congruent. So without that symbols, you could not describe it as being congruent. You can't be sure. Okay? But we can see that there are 3 sides and 3 angles, making this polygon a what?
A regular polygon.
And what kind of polygon is it?
Triangle.
Excellent. It says, if you look closely at Epcot Center's Spaceship Earth, how many of you guys have been to Epcot Center or have seen that big white circle at Disney World? Okay, so some of us have been. Epcot Center is part of Disney World, and it's famous because it has this big circular, it just looks like a huge white ball that you can go into, okay? And on the edge of it, actually, it's not smooth, okay? On the edge, there are lots of triangles like this, and you can see patterns of triangles. Okay, now the book has outlined a triangle in blue right here that has 3 congruent sides and 3 congruent acute angles. Okay, and it's asking you what type of triangle is outlined. Now, yesterday we learned how to name and identify different polygons. Today we're going to talk about how to identify and name different kinds of triangles. Okay, and I want you to take really good notes. You're going to set up a chart in your book. There are 2 ways you can classify and name triangles. One way is based on their sides. So I want you to make a T-chart like this. Okay, and on one side I want you to write that we can classify triangles by its sides. And on the other side, we could also classify triangles based on its angles. Okay, so go ahead and make a T-chart and write sides on one side and write angles on the other side. Because just like when we had leaves, right? We could classify leaves based on their veins, right? The venation, remember? We could also classify it based on their blade shape and their leaf margin, the edges, right? So just like there's 3 different ways to classify leaves, there are 2 different ways to classify triangles. Let's talk about the sides first, okay? This is an example of an equilateral triangle. An equilateral triangle has how many congruent sides? 3. So if all 3 sides of the triangle are the same, if they're all congruent, then that triangle is called an equilateral triangle. The next type of way we can describe a triangle based on its size is an isosceles triangle. Looking at this picture here, how many congruent sides does the isosceles triangle have? 2. So So if a triangle has two congruent sides, then that's called an isosceles triangle. Go ahead and write that down and draw a picture. Now, be careful when you're drawing your picture for isosceles triangle. Should you draw 3 marks on all 3 sides?
No.
Make sure you show that only 2 sides are congruent. Finally, you have a scalene triangle. How many congruent sides do you see in this scalene triangle? So if the triangle has 0 congruent sides, then it is called a scalene triangle. Okay, so that's one way. Describing the sides is one way of classifying and naming a triangle. Now, a completely separate category is the angles. If a triangle has one right angle, one 90-degree angle, it is called a right triangle. Okay? If a right triangle has one 90-degree, or it's also called a right angle. So, as a little review from 4th grade, an acute angle is less than 90 degrees, and an obtuse angle is greater than 90 degrees. So let's take a look. A triangle is called an acute triangle if it has how many acute angles? Stuart? We can see here that this angle is 75 degrees. Is that more or less than 90 degrees? Is this angle right here? Is it more or less? Is this an acute angle or an obtuse angle?
Acute.
Okay. What about this one?
Acute.
What about this one? Huh? Acute. So an acute triangle has 3 acute angles. Okay, remember that acute means less than 90 degrees. On the flip side, let's take a look at this triangle down here. This angle right here is 32 degrees. Is that acute or obtuse? Okay, this angle here is 18 degrees. Is that acute or obtuse? Thank you, Tanvi. I'm asking all of room 50 though. This angle right here is 130 degrees. Is that acute or obtuse?
Obtuse.
How do you know that 130 degrees is obtuse angle? Liam?
It's greater than 90 degrees.
Remember that obtuse means it is greater than 90 degrees. So an obtuse triangle is a triangle that has how many, has one, what? Obtuse angle.